This is the pride of Roanoke, Virginia, number 1218. She was designed and built in 1943 by the Norfolk and Western Railway. This massive locomotive is the sole survivor of the 43 Class A 2664 units. It has two sets of articulated drivers and burns lots of coal. In 1989, the 1218 is pulling an excursion train from Richmond to Roanoke, Virginia. The countryside is beautiful, and the passengers on board have been looking forward to this special trip. The 1218 was used for heavy freight service between 1936 and 1959. It could easily pull fast merchandise trains or long passenger trains up to 150 cars. It was pressed into heavy passenger and troop train service during World War II. The N&W was a coal hauling railroad, and it stayed with steam long after other railroads switched to diesel. The 1218 was eventually retired in 1959, but not to the quiet existence of a museum or even a scrapyard, but to another business. A chemical plant in Charleston, West Virginia bought the 1218 for use as an emergency boiler. It was built into the existing plant facility and continued to work. Five years later, she went to the Steamtown Museum in Vermont, but had a homecoming in 1970 when she returned to Roanoke, Virginia's Transportation Museum, and there remained on display. A traditional highlight of any excursion is the photo run-by. It allows the passengers to disembark the train and photograph the locomotive they have been traveling behind.
Everybody's up as far as I can see. I'll train my style and bring the rims out.
Here, the locomotive has had to make an emergency stop and is dangerously low on water. It must return to Montvale, Virginia to fill the tender. In Montvale, the local fire department and volunteers helped get the needed water for the locomotive. Now watered, the 1218 continues on her travels, working as hard as ever. At Blue Ridge, the 1218 majestically travels through the lush green countryside. We are arriving at 1218's home base, Roanoke, Virginia, where her fans loyally wait for her return. Another excursion complete. In 1987, at the National Railway Historical Society Convention in Roanoke, the Norfolk and Western 1218 and 611 ran side by side, thrilling rail fans both on the ground and those on board. The high-pitched whistle is a classic trademark of the Norfolk and Western mighty steam locomotive. The dome car was the best seat in the house to see the locomotive challenging one another. Even the crew cab of the 1218 is full of rail fans who didn't want to miss this opportunity.
My God, look at that crowd.
Back and forth. Both locomotives powerfully surge by one another and really put on a show. With the 611 up and running, the decision was made to rebuild the 1218. So it was towed from the Roanoke Museum to the Norfolk and Southern Steam Shop in Birmingham, Alabama. It needed an extensive overhaul, but was ready for service in early 1987. The Southeast always extends a welcome hand to any excursion that the 1218 travels. The man at the throttle today is Mr. Robert Plater, former chairman of the Norfolk and Southern. He was responsible for rebuilding the 1218 into the magnificent steam locomotive it is today. It was elbow to elbow as cameras clicked away to photograph this special double-header run-by of the 1218 and the 611 during the convention. Today we see the 1218 headed toward another NRHS convention, but it is 1990, and this time we are on our way to St. Louis, Missouri. As the travel day comes to an end, the golden glow of the sun catches the train as it continues its trek on the old Southern line, headed for St. Louis. The 1218 is pulling a 19-car train called the Independence Limited. It is sponsored by the Roanoke chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. It will stop in several towns along its route to pick up and drop off passengers as the 1218 makes its way to St. Louis. Crowds are drawn to the mighty steam locomotive in every town they enter. It's a special moment for both those on board and off. The flatlands will allow the 1218 to make good time. Norfolk and Southern diesels greet the 1218 on its way west. As a member of the Norfolk and Southern Steam Program, all the 1218's maintenance is done by the railroad's full-time steam crew in Birmingham. Norfolk and Southern Corporation believes that operating steam excursion locomotives is a great public relations tool, and here local news helicopters were on hand to record the 1218's trip to St. Louis. Upon reaching East St. Louis, the engine was uncoupled from the train, where it was able to cross the Mississippi River for the very first time. The 1218 is crossing over the Merchants Bridge. This is strictly a railroad bridge, which is owned by the Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis. There was no mistaking the Norfolk and Western 1218 for anything else at the St. Louis Convention. The 1218 will be one of 4 steam locomotives attending, but will be the only coal burner there. It stands proudly, with dedication to service, as it continues excursions throughout the Southeast. She moves across the flatlands like a storm. When she races through a small town in Illinois, the ground beneath her trembles. And everywhere she goes, she's a living reminder of simpler times. This is the St. Louis Southwestern Railway locomotive number 819. For years, the 819 and engines like it pulled the fastest trains on the Cotton Belt route between Tyler, Texas and East St. Louis, Illinois. Today, she is a celebrity, the last of her breed, a link to a time not so long ago when the lonesome sound of a steam whistle made people young and old think about faraway places. Scenes like this, once commonplace, now happen just a couple of times a year when Engine 819 makes special excursion runs, like this one, from Pine Bluff, Arkansas to Tyler, Texas. Locomotive 819 was built in 1942 at the height of World War II. Freight and passenger traffic on the Cotton Belt route was at an all-time high then. The railroad wanted to buy modern diesel locomotives to answer that demand, but the War Production Board allocated the scarce diesels to other, bigger railroads. The Cotton Belt was not discouraged. Boilers were ordered from Baldwin Locomotive Works. Parts were acquired from various suppliers, and the 819 and 4 sister engines were constructed in the railroad shops at Pine Bluff, Arkansas. That same determination was the drive behind a small group of dedicated volunteers who refurbished the 819 in the very building where the locomotive was originally built. The restoration was painstakingly done by members of the Cotton Belt Rail Historical Society, many retired Cotton Belt employees who had actually worked on the locomotive in her glory days. The restoration cost more than $125,000 and involved more than 35,000 man-hours of volunteer labor. That's about $2 million worth of labor alone in today's market. But volunteers say, you really can't put a price tag on the result. At dusk, the 819 spreads her magical spell over Texarkana, anxious to begin her next journey. This steam locomotive has a wheel configuration of 4 leading wheels, 8 driving wheels, and 4 trailing wheels. That design is called a northern configuration. She burns oil, lots of it, about 8 gallons a mile. Locomotive 819 was primarily built for freight service and for hauling long, heavy wartime troop trains. Today she pulls a train of passenger cars that have also been restored and maintained by volunteer labor. The cars are actually owned by the individual members of the Historical Society. An annual event for the engine is the Pine Bluff to Fordyce, Arkansas excursion, where they celebrate the Fordyce on the Cotton Belt Festival. But here, the 819 has traveled beyond Fordyce for the first time since being restored, and the citizens of Mount Pleasant, Texas give her a very warm welcome. Arriving in Tyler, Texas for a Cotton Belt Employees Safety Award celebration, she was the star of the show. The engine was only 15 years old when Diesels took over on the Cotton Belt, and for almost 20 years she sat on display at a Pine Bluff City Park as a monument to the city's past. However, a small group of rail buffs thought this would be a better way to remember her. This scene could have been 40 years ago as the 819 speeds across this timber trestle. The gentle rolling hills of Texas are typical of the region that the 819 was built to serve. Intersecting with modern freeway transportation, the 819 shows her stuff. The ultimate way to ride behind a steam locomotive is sitting in the dome car with others, sharing this great experience. You can almost smell the smoke as you hang out an open window. The lounge car is a great place to meet fellow passengers. A Southern Pacific business car brings up the rear of the train, where you can stand on the platform and enjoy the view of the countryside. The Cotton Belt Historical Society accepted an invitation to bring Locomotive 819 and her train to the 1990 National Railway Historical Society Convention in St. Louis, Missouri. This is the old Cotton Belt shop building in Pine Bluff, where the 819 was restored. It is a very proud and exciting time as the volunteers prepare the locomotive for her trip to St. Louis, the longest trip the engine has made since her restoration. Today, elbow grease and some last-minute welding puts the finishing touches on one of the passenger cars. There's lots of last-minute work to be done. Volunteers ice the train by hand. The ice goes into dining car refrigerators. Daryl Kaysen is one of the volunteers who spearheaded the 819 restoration effort. The train leaves for the big trip to St. Louis in the morning, and there's still lots to do.
Well, we got to wash the engine. Then we got to wipe the rods down again. And then later on, we got to light it off on oil. We got about 60-pound steam pressure now. We'll probably wait till we get about 75 pounds. And light it up, build it up real slow. I don't want to get it up to 250 pounds in about 2 hours.
Finally, as the cars are pulled out, there are some jobs that just won't get finished.
They just took off and left me, and I was standing there painting in midair. I'll catch you when you get off.
Powerful brushes shine with the gold of the evening as back muscles feel the work of the day. Cleaning, polishing, all performed with a loyalty for days gone by. As the sun breaks, the locomotive and crew are ready. And even a local television crew came to see the locomotive off on its big trip.
Welcome back to Pine Bluff here on the Cotton Belt Railroad tracks here at the Cotton Belt headquarters. The 819, this famous steam locomotive here in Arkansas, about ready to head out. They're going at full speed out there on the tracks. How fast are we going to be going?
We're not going to exceed 55 miles an hour.
What is the official speedometer showing?
Oh, it's up around 80.
80?
Yeah.
Would it still, I mean, not that you would ever find out, but would it still do 80?
Yes, it will.
Finally, the 819 is on its way. Over the White River at Clarendon, Arkansas, the 819 crosses in style. The town of Brinkley, Arkansas, turned out to welcome Locomotive 819. Hoses were connected to local fire hydrants as the fire department helped the crew fill the tender with needed water. The Cotton Belt has been a part of this town's history for a long time and has left its indelible mark on the community. At Hickory Ridge, Arkansas, another crowd gathers round to honor the 819. The large, black, smoking engine still astounds young and old alike. On her way to Ilmo, Missouri, Cotton Belt 819 flies along the silvery rail she was meant to travel. As we look down from an overpass at Malden, Missouri, we get a special view of the 819 as she continues her journey. You can see the wonder and excitement in the faces of these children at Prairie du Rocher, Illinois. St. Louis Iron Mountain and Southern Steam Locomotive number 5 honors the 819 with her whistle as the 819 continues on her way to St. Louis. The train continues on its journey racing toward St. Louis to participate in the National Railway Historical Society's convention. With the 819's arrival in East St. Louis, Illinois, the locomotive is seen here arriving in the Cotton Belt Yard. It has been a memorable day for both the crew and passengers who have made this special trip. The passengers are disembarking the train, and for the next 4 days will be attending the convention and its festivities. With the famous St. Louis Arch in the background, the crew of the 819 once again begins the laborious task of cleaning and preparing the engine for its participation at the convention. The road grime from today's trip is scrubbed off until the engine shines. The locomotive backs toward Union Station, where she will be placed on display for thousands to enjoy. The crew and volunteers who have dedicated so much work to see that this engine had a safe and speedy trip now find no greater reward than to accompany her to St. Louis. This is North Vancouver, British Columbia. The British Columbia Railway Depot is the starting point for excursion trips through this beautiful country. The crown jewel of BC Rail is the Royal Hudson, and it is ready to depart the North Vancouver Depot. This is the Royal Hudson steam locomotive number 2860. It is 365,000 pounds of Canadian Pacific Railway history. It comes from the series of engines numbered from 2860 to 2864. Its boiler was made in Montreal and has driving wheels that are 75 inches in diameter. The Royal Hudson pulls passenger excursion trips from North Vancouver northward to the town of Squamish. The train travels along the forested ocean coast, making this an exceptionally scenic trip. At Horseshoe Bay, the 2860 passes by a British Columbia ferry that is ready to depart for Vancouver Island. The Royal Hudson looks spectacular against the rocks and trees as it travels along Howe Sound. Inside the cab is distinctively Canadian. What looks like a steering wheel is actually the reverser. Arriving at the Squamish Depot, the train loaded with passengers is backed into town, where they can do some sightseeing and have a casual lunch. After the locomotive has been wide, it returns to couple onto the train. The Royal Hudson is then watered and prepared for the return trip. In steam days, the Royal Hudson didn't actually operate on the British Columbia Railway. Today, she has become a symbol of the region's rich railway history. Let's sit back and enjoy the sights of the train as it returns to North Vancouver. After the train crosses the bridge, it will enter the North Vancouver yards and complete its day's journey.
From British Columbia.
In 1986, Vancouver, British Columbia hosted Expo 86.
More than 2 million people have already been through the gates.
Transportation was the theme for this global event, and people came by all modes of travel. A feature at Expo was a one-week event called Steam Expo. Invitations were sent out, and locomotives from all over the world had the opportunity to come before tens of thousands of Expo visitors to exhibit each engine's unique characteristics. A platform allowed for a much better vantage point so that many could share this special opportunity. The official opening of Steam Expo was the Grand Parade of Steam. The Royal Hudson locomotive we have just been watching has given up her excursion duties to be the host engine at this international event. This ex-Canadian Pacific 464 was a crowd favorite, and she leads the way for the parade to start. Locomotive number 3 is the oldest operating steamer in Canada, built in 1882 for the Canadian Pacific Railway. It later served the city of Winnipeg Hydro Rail System. Currently, number 3 carries tourists during the summer months on the Prairie Dog Central Railroad. It is proudly owned by the Vintage Locomotive Society. This is locomotive number 1392, an impressive 10-wheeler built in 1913 by Montreal Locomotive Works. This engine has not been retired and continues to work on a regular schedule. The wheel configuration on this Canadian National is 460 and was brought to Vancouver by the Alberta Pioneer Railroad Association. It was carried on a flat car all the way from Edmonton, Alberta. Locomotive number 1077 was built in 1923 by the Montreal Locomotive Works for the Canadian Pacific Railway. It was one of the last steam locomotives used for logging service on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. Herb Hawkins, the boilermaker, was brought out of retirement in his 80th year to rebuild the original boiler by hand. And this locomotive comes to Steam Expo as a memorial to all pioneer mechanics during the era of steam. Number 1201 is a light Canadian Pacific 462 built in 1944. It had been retired but was restored to service and is now owned by the National Museum of Science and Technology in Ottawa, Canada. 1201 was originally coal-fired with an automatic stoker, but when put back into service, the museum had it converted to oil. Thousands of people had the wonderful opportunity to see all of the steam locomotives up close in a magnificent exhibition of steam power. The Steam Expo grounds were a beehive of activity, with the public enjoying the sights, the sounds, and the smells of steam locomotives. These locomotives from all over the world provided a rare and unique atmosphere for those interested in the steam transportation that built our mighty nation. It was a very special day indeed. As more people viewed the exhibits and Vancouver bustled with activity, Locomotive 3716 handles excursion duties as it replaces the Royal Hudson from North Vancouver to Squamish. We have been royally entertained, and Vancouver has once again been an excellent host. Next, we will travel with a special double-headed train through beautiful Western Canada. Here, the Royal Hudson number 2860 and the Canadian National 6060 are leaving Vancouver in the early morning fog, headed for a rainy, wet trip to Kamloops, British Columbia. In October of 1988, the Royal Hudson Steam Society operated the longest double-header steam excursion ever attempted in North America. The Royal Hudson Excursion Service has ended for the year, making it possible for the 2860 and the 3716 to be used for the trip. The train continues its journey with the 6060 on the point for the trip into Alberta. The 6060 has been in Vancouver since Steam Expo and will be returning to its home base in Jasper, Alberta. The autumn colors add a special feeling when watching these locomotives as they travel through this beautiful country. The 6060 looks stunning on the turntable in Jasper, but unfortunately the locomotive has developed a problem and will not be able to continue on. The Royal Hudson will pull the train today to Prince George, where the 3716 is waiting. After a short stop, the 2860 starts up again to continue toward Prince George. The 2860 finishes a great day, and tomorrow the 3716 will take the lead. With the 3716 on the point, the doubleheader continues on its journey. We have a bird's eye view of the train as it snakes its way toward Lillooet. The steam hangs in the cold evening air as the long trip comes to a close. This 2,000-mile trip has been a complete success. Passengers were treated to stunning scenery and a unique railroading experience. The train will shortly be pulling into Vancouver, British Columbia. The cold black metal of 2860 joins 3716 in the warm North Vancouver engine house as a memorable trip comes to a close. Canada continues to preserve its rich heritage through the meticulous care provided for these marvelous historical machines.